We're here for Julian L. Simon and our rock-solid belief that humanity is genuinely the ultimate resource. As a business economist, Julian reshaped how we think about some of the most difficult problems facing mankind. This idea of what shapes us has been on my mind a lot lately. Speaking to the question of the grandeur of Parliament, it was Churchill who observed, "We shape our buildings, and thereafter they shape us." And the notion there is that buildings we create, like institutions, they reflect who we are and what we value, and in turn our values, including how we interact with each other, they're shaped by the places where we spend our time. And tonight we gather in a new place. And in this way, celebrating Julian Simon and his legacy, as well as CEI's successes, we demonstrate our values. Come what may, this is a community. It's linked by liberty and cheerful optimism, and every now and again, a really good party. Now this place, it's called The Reach, and the building overlooks the fluid boundary here between the nation's governance seat and the rest of America. It's designed to bring the performing arts into the community, to reach out rather than to close off access. Tomorrow we'll gather across the hall in a theater. There are various studios around. Rehearsals are sometimes held outside on the lawns. It's reaching out and getting energy and involvement. There's a vitality there. And this is like CEI and our supporters, our allies, and all those gathered here tonight, constantly reaching out, listening, learning, adapting our tactics, sometimes our messages, but never our objectives. Now, community, it's quite a contrast to a dominant theme during the COVID era, which is isolation. There's the isolation that comes from disorientation, from constantly changing rules and best practices, habits. Certainly, free market ideas are increasingly isolated when in the blink of an eye, we see trillions replace billions. Social infrastructure replace common sense in our legislative debates. If we haven't experienced it, we all know someone who has suffered from the isolation of illness or grief. And when the diagnosis is isolation, the prescription is a shift in perspective, away from the self toward others. That shift produces a connection, and that connection is the special magic we have at CEI. It's an inoculation against pessimism, or worse, despair in the face of political adversity. Those relationships buoy us when we face litigation that drags on for years. When our focus is on others, it's much easier to bear up. Now, most people, they're never going to know the difference between an NPRM and an EO. The CFR might as well be from Mars. They don't care much for the fiction that I call independent agencies. But I'll tell you who does care. It's these people right here tonight, the people who helped deliver more than 460 deregulatory actions last year. While we were locked in, economic activity was locked up, and CEI showed up. These same people, these are the people who drove 11 major regulatory initiatives, all based on CEI proposals. The meme people, I think they're over here at table 18. Here we go. They're going to tell you that all heroes don't wear capes, and that's fine. I'm telling you that some of those people are at CEI. On good days, on bad days, they all show up. And they show up for that shared humane mission. They take the slings and arrows, they sacrifice, and they deliver. Now, at this point, a more practiced speaker would delete a line because my generous MC of the evening stole it from me. But it's too important of a line because I want to make sure you all understand about the dozen people who also show up. And sprinkled around this room is our board of directors. I hope throughout the evening you'll take a chance to thank them as well. There's more. There's more. Among them this evening, a very special thank you to our founder, Fred Smith, seated at table 22. Briefly, let me tell you why we succeed. It's because these people embody the best attributes of humanism. How do those laws really affect people? That's what's kept at the forefront of our analysis. Curiosity drives the research. There is a confidence that reason can collect, test, evaluate, and then either accept or reject the evidence. I would like to illustrate this point with a brief story about poor farmers, the IRS, and the Constitution. And it begins with a friendship between Charles Moore and Ravi Agarwal. They worked together at a West Coast software company some 30 years ago. Ravi had the dream of improving life for the people where he grew up in India. It's a place where small-scale farming dominated, and poverty was a constant. Eventually, he identified a market for reliable, affordable hand tools. Helped with investments from friends like Charles and Kathleen Moore, Ravi took risks and he launched Kizencraft, a company to serve these poor Indian farmers. Investors knew from the beginning that profits would be reinvested to grow the company, to expand its reach. The returns would come in the form of stronger, healthier communities, through better farming, aided by modern tools. And the returns were handsome. Kizencraft now has a reach all across India, hundreds of employees, and thousands of dealers. There are millions of satisfied customers. And like all successful entrepreneurs, Ravi was looking outward to the needs of his customer. By serving them, he also did great work to address poverty and hunger in India. Charles and Kathleen and the other investors, they looked outward away from themselves as well. Instead of expecting income in the form of dividends, their returns are measured in the solution to a vexing social problem. And that solution was delivered through the magic of capitalism. This humanist impulse to keep people in the forefront of our worldview, well, it's too much for the Internal Revenue Service. Unchecked, the IRS has claimed income, even though no income has been realized. In 2017, the Congress, the President, they enacted a law that made this deeming, as it's called, retroactive for some 30 years. And all of this flies in the face of an explicit constitutional protection. It's unfair, it's unconstitutional, it's plainly an overreach, but CEI is there. And in fact, the man leading that litigation, he's with us tonight. I'd like to thank Andrew Grossman and the appellate team he leads at Baker Hostetler. Andrew's team represents CEI and the Moores against the IRS. And like Andrew, we insist the Constitution is more than a parchment barrier against, as Madison said, in Federalist 48, the encroaching spirit of power. So we do regulatory law, and I know that's hard for most people to understand. Certainly we have our troubles with the Fourth Estate. I want to accept, of course, the people over here sitting with Travis and Christine and Kate. You guys are great. We'll make sure to get you a quote before the end of the night. Anyway, I was saying difficult policies. And we pursue these without allies at the White House in an evenly divided Congress. And that requires exceptionalism, and that's the standard to which we point. So I've talked tonight about perspective and looking outward, shifting focus to where the law, where it really works in practice, to those regulatory frictions that are often, in fact, illegal. Fundamentally, that shift is an act of love. It requires giving something up of ourselves for others. And it's intimate. For professionals, I know that can be uncomfortable. It can feel unnatural. It's one of those stranger things of CEI that we do it. We accept the vulnerability associated with not always climbing the ladder of fame or fortune. And tonight we have a different sort of intimacy. Anyone who has attended our awards in the past has noticed this is a smaller room. But I'm quite assured that intimate is no less joyous. And I know later this evening it will be no less raucous. It's that enthusiasm for others that binds us to what we do and to each other. It brings forward into the present, ready to face the future after more than 18 months of isolation, barricaded from those that we love. Now, Julian Simon's work has exactly that feature. When the economic literature was riddled by the challenge of finite resources and an increasing population that demanded their use, it was Julian that had the genius to reintroduce to the world the role of ingenuity. Through our creativity, investing in solutions that solve the problems of others, population growth suddenly became an asset. And that's because Julian valued people. He organized a hugely influential and wide-ranging career around this very humanist impulse. Frustrated by the doomsayers of his era, whose ideas and arguments echo to this day, Julian made a very public and famous bet. Of course, he took the side of humanity, of creativity, of innovation, and of reasoned, evidence-based optimism. He won. Paul Ehrlich lost, and mankind as the ultimate resource entered our lexicon. Specifically, these men bet on whether the prices of 5 metals would rise in the coming decade, presumably because of the insatiable appetites of Ehrlich's population bomb. The prices of those 5 metals, tin, nickel, tungsten, chromium, and copper, all 5 dropped. And they dropped because of substitutes, because of developments of innovation for processing. They dropped because of the discovery of new deposits. Each of those 5 metals is represented in the award we present tonight in the form of the veins that you can see in the leaf. Julian had a habit, and I love this detail about him. He would include leaves in his correspondence. He found beauty both in their delicate nature and the symbolism of natural renewal. So tonight we present the 20th Julian L. Simon Award to a man who, like Julian, has challenged received wisdom. Through the collection of extensive field research, his studies, papers, and books, the talks that I have enjoyed over the years, they have upended the tragically failed cliches of economic development. My first exposure came through the path-breaking book, White Man's Burden. He challenged the West on the question of whether we really mean to address poverty or to appear generous. Large-scale grant-making suffers from all sorts of endemic knowledge problems, yet smaller, piecemeal solutions that connect to local institutions and knowledge, well, wouldn't you know, they have a positive track record. Tracing the history of developmental economics and the tyranny of experts, he explained how we got to this place of dysfunction. He went one step further and he packaged it with the practical prescriptions for what to do. Namely, individual rights paired with political rights and freedoms. This is the recipe. This is the recipe for spontaneous, oftentimes ingenious, in a truly Simon-esque manner, sustainable development. Too often, poverty is understood by Western technocrats as a technocratic problem. It was Bill Easterly who advocates against moral neutrality when it comes to the poor. This is because the moral duty is to protect the rights of the poor, and it must be greater than the desire to protect the privileges of the powerful. It is Bill Easterly who has paved the way for a whole new generation of scholars to examine and extend the relationship of wealth creation, poverty, and fundamental rights. Poverty is, as he says, about a shortage of rights, economic and political. It's also Bill Easterly without blinders about the costs and the very challenges of capitalism, who has shown with case study after case study that it's spontaneous solutions where markets and technology are allowed to flourish that we see relief provided for the poor around the world. The greatest threat to those solutions, it's the lack of meaningful check on state power. The poor, like you and me, and everyone we will interact with tonight and tomorrow, they have unalienable rights. They have that same dignity. Despite the very best of intentions, the dominant model of economic development fails to recognize this dignity in all people. In the past 3 decades, well known to most people in this room, capitalism has elevated 1.2 billion people out of poverty. However, traditional, expert-driven planning, top-down and distant, the very opposite of the intimate and humane policymaking that we talk about. These economic development programs have spent some $3 trillion in the last 70 years with negligible enduring effect. And so when future histories are written about the next billion people lifted from poverty, prominent among the heroes will be Julian Lincoln Simon. Prominent among those heroes is Dr. William Easterly, professor of economics at New York University and co-director of the NYU Development Research Initiative. Please join me in congratulations for Bill Easterly, winner of the 2021 Julian L. Simon Memorial Award.